Dragon's Dogma 2 DLC leak. Are we finally going past the sea?
Even though the discourse around Dragon's Dogma 2 was pretty negative going into launch week, Capcom still got a ton of early adopters thanks to the hype as well as very positive reviews that went live a few days prior. There are so many amazing things about this game that were overshadowed by the unfortunate controversy, specifically in regards to the PC performance. So hopefully these updates manage to shift the focus from the shortcomings to the things.
I don't know, people were talking about all of that, but when Dragon's Dogma 2 launched, it proved something, okay? That people are actually really reasonable. You bitch and moan about DLC and pay-to-win microtransactions and all of that useless garbage, right? And above that, the game's still good and people like that the game's good. 30 FPS in the city, 20 FPS in the city, does not matter. Still a good game. And I think that's really great, that people called it a good game and still downvoted it for Capcom's greedy way of doing things. And again, if you're one of those people who's gonna say, oh, but Capcom always does this, I don't care. That's not an excuse. You always doing bad doesn't excuse you from doing bad, okay?
That could make Dragon's Dogma 2 Game of the Year. Now, luckily, according to Capcom, Dragon's Dogma 2 was a big financial success thanks to the fact that it sold over 2.5 million copies in its first 2 weeks across PC and consoles. This puts the Dragon's Dogma franchise at over 10 million copies sold. Capcom is also expecting DD2 to keep selling copies over the next few years like the original game did. I saw some comments that said that 2.5 million copies in 2 weeks is actually a disappointment, but this couldn't be further from the truth. Now, sure, some games sell way more than Dragon's Dogma 2 did at launch, but you have to understand this is an M-rated RPG with an extremely deep gameplay loop. It's not as mainstream as games like Spider-Man 2 or God of War Ragnarok that get tons of widespread mainstream.
I mean, Spider-Man 2 was an absolute financial disaster though, so you know, we kind of need to remember that part if we want to be fair.
Attention at launch because of the legacy of their IP. It's also not like other Capcom franchises like Street Fighter or Resident Evil that have massive communities waiting for the next entry. Dragon's Dogma came out over a decade ago and is largely seen as a niche title, so the fact that they sold over 2.5 million copies this quickly is actually a huge achievement, and I for one am really—
I think that's actually completely true and on point. It is niche. The same way that, you know, Souls-like games are actually still niche, honestly.
Happy for the developers. Remember, the first Dragon's Dogma only sold 7 million copies over a decade on the market. The sequel is starting out with 2.5 million copies sold right out of the gate, which bodes well for the future of this game as well as the entire franchise. So when it comes to updates though, a number of stability patches have already been released or confirmed, and while the state of the game is certainly better than it was on launch day, there's still a lot of work that remains to be done. The optimization still needs to be ironed out, and performance is still a lot worse than it should be for a game running on the RE engine. Now, some have argued that Dragon's Dogma 2 runs poorly because it's the first game built on the RE engine to be this large in scale, but the more that people test it, the less accurate that explanation seems to be.
I mean, I don't care why it does not run super optimized. I care that it doesn't, and that should be fixed. I don't care. God, I hate this, that so many gamers are programmers and, you know, stuff like that also, and they're like, oh, the engine limitations, think about the engine limitations, they're working with a bad engine, the engine can... I don't care. I just don't care. How hard it is to understand, I don't care about your engine limitations. If game performs bad, game performs bad. I don't care about your engine limitations. I care about the fact that you find a loophole, a way to fix it, okay?
Be. Dragon's Dogma 2 has a number of optimization issues that other RE engine games simply don't experience, and it all seems to suggest that this game might have been pushed out a little too early, likely so that they could hit Capcom's quarterly financial deadlines. Now, in a way, this is actually good news because it means that with some time and care, Dragon's Dogma 2 should be able to hit the same level of optimization as other RE engine games, assuming Capcom allows the team to keep working on it instead of just pulling the plug now that the launch sales are out of the way. But the team does seem committed to fixing up their project, and assuming the rumors about the DLC are true, they're certainly going to want some stability updates before new content drops. So if you're still playing Dragon's Dogma 2 and are hoping for performance improvements, Capcom already confirmed that they will be updating that in the near future. But speaking of DLC, it's looking more and more likely that Capcom is working on something behind the scenes to add more content to the base game in the form of a potential paid expansion. Now, in late March, Capcom started sending out surveys to Dragon's Dogma 2 players asking them a number of questions about the state of the game, but there were also a couple of questions about about.
In the modern age, the idea that there is not gonna be a DLC for a game that sold 2 point something million copies in the first 2 weeks, yeah, that does not sound plausible that there's no DLC. It's happening.
DLC. The survey asked players what kind of DLC they'd like to see and roughly how much they'd be willing to pay for it, with options ranging from less than $10 to $50 or more. The survey was also made available to the public, and if you participate...
Dude, you know what I don't understand about these surveys? Who the fuck ever picks the big numbers? Oh, I would be happy to pay $50 for Capcom. Are you stupid? Well, a rhetoric question, I guess, in this situation. You are stupid. Like, who gets these questionnaires and then says, "Oh yeah, I will be happy to pay more money than the minimum amount that is said here." Bro, if you get these questionnaires, you always click the minimum amount of money paid. That's how you do things, you dumbass.
In it, Capcom will give you a free digital wallpaper, so it seems they want as much data as possible, which really sounds to me like they're laying the groundwork for a paid expansion. Now, given how game development works nowadays, I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Capcom already has some ideas for the DLC ready to enter development, or maybe the team has been working on those ideas in their off time, but now that the game is out, the publisher needs to see how much demand there is for a paid expansion before officially greenlighting full development of more content. Because at the end of the day, Capcom is a business, and if they don't think people are going to pay for the DLC, they're not going to want to spend money for people to make it. But with the success of the base game's launch and how much buzz there seems to be around for future content, and the fact that Capcom is making the survey open for the public for maximum intel, I think it's all but confirmed that some kind of DLC is going to come out for Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, that being said, there have been some rumors floating around that Dragon's Dogma 2 already has some DLC basically already ready due to the fact that it's cut from the base game, which is something that Capcom actually did relatively frequently back in the Xbox 360 days. How many of you remember how many controversies Capcom stirred up in the early 2010s by locking DLC content on the game disc and then selling it as DLC?
Don't remember about Capcom, but other companies have definitely done this. Pretty frequent amount, in fact. So, you know, maybe not necessarily Capcom, but yeah, definitely true.
I don't think that Capcom is going to start falling back on their old habits, but if they did cut content from the base game, then that would be really unfortunate, but it wouldn't be out of character for them to have cut some content from the base game so they could use it to pad a paid expansion. Now, some have also criticized Dragon's Dogma 2 for not having much of an enemy variety, so is it possible that there were going to be more enemy types, but Capcom cut them so they could have something to sell in a future DLC? Obviously, nothing is confirmed just yet. I don't want to spread negative rumors for no reason, but the whole situation does seem kind of fishy to me. And that leads us to the other side of this DLC conversation, though, as there was an alleged leak that came out recently describing the planned paid expansion, and honestly, if this is what was in the works the entire time, I think the fan base will be very satisfied with it. And no, the leak doesn't say anything about recycled base game content in the expansion, which should be reassuring. According to the leak, which like I said is not 100% confirmed just yet, so take it with a grain of salt, the expansion is titled The Dragon Princess and is considerably bigger than the Dark Arisen expansion for the first Dragon's Dogma game. The DLC is reportedly not going to alter any of the base game's content, but rather add a ton of new stuff to the map, including a new country called Galicia, which is based on various northern European countries. Now, the leak said that the area will be roughly the size.
Interesting. That sounds pretty good in my opinion. I mean, definitely nothing to be dissatisfied about. Okay. Yeah, do you think this is going to be over the seas, though?
Size of the main game's map, meaning this expansion will be more or less double the size of the play area, and you'll access the new area by visiting a...
Double the size of the current area? Wait, that's pretty big. That's really big. That's a DLC that's double the size? There's no way they're gonna ask $10. Damn. An area that large for a DLC, that seems completely improbable, though. Like, let's be real, that's not happening. Double the size? No. That's impossible. Completely impossible unless the DLC is gonna cost double the original game's value.
Point in east of Vernworth. The DLC story will only be accessible after you finish the main game story, but you'll be able to explore the new region at your leisure, which I think is a nice touch if that ends up being the case.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Now, in terms of pricing, Capcom is reportedly planning on charging $30 for the DLC, although it could end up being more expensive, and the leaker also claims that the expansion was in the works before the base game was actually out, and it will be Capcom's biggest paid expansion ever and feature roughly 35 new enemy types and 10 new monsters.
35 new enemy types. Okay, that's pretty decent. I think.
So I guess technically some of those enemy types may have been planned for the base game at one point, but if you were worried about a paid expansion just selling the content that was cut from the base game, this alleged DLC leak sounds like it's not going to be anything like that, and any recycled base game content is going to be a very small
I guess that's good, yeah.
piece of the larger puzzle, which I'm okay with. Now, one of the biggest changes to the base game that needs to be made as soon as possible is the limited saves. As it stands right now, there is only really one save slot in Dragon's Dogma 2, so you can't have multiple characters at the same time. This also presented an issue in the PC version where players couldn't overwrite their one save file for any reason, meaning if you beat the game and wanted to start over with a new character, you literally couldn't do that. Luckily, Capcom has already released the new game option, but the option for multiple save files
They actually released that fairly. When did they release it? But that's not even new news at this point. It's pretty old news.
Is still not here. However, if you're playing on PC, there's a mod that's available right now, and it's quickly becoming one of the most popular mods available. It's simply called DD2 Save Manager, and it's been downloaded over 20,000 times at the time I'm making this video.
Makes
the mod
sense.
is simply a save slot manager, and you're able to kind of hot swap in between different save files as well as different characters with this manager. Now, if you guys remember from Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen, this mod is essentially the update to the very popular save manager mod. So if you're playing on PC and you were hoping for multiple save files as soon as possible, I would strongly recommend going giving this one a download, because we still don't know for sure if Capcom is actually going to be adding this as an official feature or not. My guess is that they don't have any plans for adding any official save slot manager, so the only way
How did they not have plans for something that basic though? That's what I don't honestly understand. It's like good game and horrible mismanagement on the most basic and fundamental of levels possible. How is this a real thing?
that you're going to be able to do this is by modding the game. Now the question still remains, when are we going to be getting the next update for Dragon's Dogma 2? Will it be this week? Will it be next week? Or are we going to have to wait a little bit longer for the next update? It definitely seems like Dragon's Dogma 2 has been on top of the game with getting updates out as soon as possible. So I'd say that we're probably going to get a smaller update this week, and then we'll be getting a bigger title update sometime later this month. Well guys, that's going to wrap it up with this video. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. What do you think?
It's pretty interesting, pretty good, I have to say. I like it. Well, Dragon's Dogma is an absolutely great game, no matter the pay-to-win things in the cash shop. Some of them are also BS, as we all know, but you know, hey, I mean, it still looks good, it still looks fun. And a DLC for something like this, I think that's gonna sell pretty well. Most people who played Dragon's Dogma 2 said it's good, okay? It's hard to find people who are actually ironically calling it just bad because they think the gameplay is bad. Yeah, kind of hard to find those people. Anyway, that was Best Nemo. This was Quizzer Said Sen. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.